of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Our neighbor's choice. And that's the beginning of what we do every day, and that's broadcast from the heart of the Sunshine State. You're listening to a show that challenges toxic groupthink. I'm your host, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you as we look at the news today with a fresh perspective, and that is putting personhood first. Not political tribalism, not blame games. We don't want any of that here. We want folks to think for themselves and say the truth. And joining me now is a friend of the program. He is the founder of BringOurTroopsHome.us. We have Sergeant Dan McKnight with us. How you doing, Dan?
David, I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing great, too. It's great to have you on the program. And this is a great time to think about the holiday spirit, what's going on in our culture today, where people are supposed to be having our troops come home from Afghanistan. Any thoughts on that promise here?
Absolutely. You know, Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller is actually in Afghanistan today, meeting with the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, discussing troop withdrawal and getting the last of the American troops out of that endless war. And while he was there, a car bomb killed a group of Afghan citizens and kind of ceased the talk. So President Trump is still trying to deliver on that promise of bringing the troops home by Christmas or shortly after, and the SecDef that he's got in place is helping him do that. So it's just a matter of time before all American troops get a chance to come home, and it's long overdue, David.
So they've been delayed, right? The troops coming home has been delayed, but you still think it could happen shortly after Christmas, or what's your thought?
Yeah, they're saying now that there'll be less than 2,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan by January 15th, 5 days before President Trump leaves office. If that's ultimately what happens with the Electoral College certification, I think President Trump has the ability to do more, but I think his hands are fairly tied. And we know that a Biden administration, if that's what happens, those troops plus more will probably end up going back and propagating this endless war cycle that we've been in for the last 2 decades.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like we're in for mess with Biden here. But we also have a special guest with us. He comes on the program often for various issues, but this is a unique time because it's our Veterans Radio segment, and he's a veteran himself. We have State Representative from Florida, Anthony Sabatini, with us. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. Just driving down the road.
Well, very good. We're grateful to have you on as well, because I know that you have been a big proponent of something that Sergeant Dan McKnight with BringOurTroopsHome.us has been a big champion of as well, which is the Defend the Guard Act. And so, Dan, do you want to start off here and explain to us the Defend the Guard Act, and then we can engage with Representative Sabatini?
Absolutely. So, Defend the Guard, in its essence, is a bill in support of the National Guard. I'm a National Guard veteran. Representative Sabatini is actively serving in the National Guard. This bill is in support of the state's National Guard. And what it does, in essence, is it says that the governors of the states will not release the National Guard into federal service to serve in armed combat unless Congress has first done their job and declared war. That means that the National Guard can't go fight in these foreign forever wars unless Congress has first done their job, which is outlined in the Constitution. It's not a radical thought. It's not a radical concept. But in the day and age that we live in, it's considered radical. And currently, right now, we've got this legislation already introduced in 10 states: Hawaii, Idaho, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Iowa, West Virginia, South Carolina, New Hampshire, and Maine. And we're excited about some other states that are coming on board, and that's why we've got Representative Sabatini here. He is working with Representative Melanie Bell in Florida and pushing Defend the Guard in Florida. And Representative Sabatini has been just launching and introducing some incredible liberty-focused legislation in Florida, and he's the perfect spokesman to kind of carry the torch on this. But he is liberty-minded. He is pro-defense, and I think he's as strongly pro-Constitution and liberty-minded as they come.
Yeah, I want to kick it over to you, Anthony Sabatini. Tell us about the Defend the Guard Act in Florida and what people can expect with this bill.
Well, thanks, David. I think Dan really nailed it. At the end of the day, this is a pro-military, pro-National Guard policy. But as importantly as that, I think it's important to mention that it's purely the constitutional practice that we're trying to achieve here. It's a pro-Constitution bill. This is a bill that gets us away from the unconstitutional way in which Congress and the states indirectly have been a war and deployment of troops that take place far too long. This is going to bring us back to where the Constitution, where the Founding Fathers wanted us to be, which is a bill that says the Congress has to declare war before troops are sent to those into overseas theaters. Mm-hmm. And so following the Constitution, I think, should be the first, foremost, most important thing that any legislator considers and tries to do as soon as they're in office. And so this bill is long overdue. I'm excited about the bill sponsor, Melanie Bell from Polk County. She's a great member. I think she has a big heart for the issue, and she's going to be a key sponsor. I'm happy to assist her in the bill. Obviously, I'll be supporting the bill, co-sponsoring it, and trying to win over some of our colleagues for those who find it to be a new issue. For a lot of people, it's a novel issue. They simply don't understand the conflict with the Constitution that's occurred over the last 90 years or so in American history when it comes to declaring war and sending troops to endless wars overseas. And this bill is going to be an educational tool for that, and it's going to get us back to where we need to be.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that the states are supposed to have power over their National Guards, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand the
pretty clear on this. It doesn't even give an authorization.
Hold on a second. Let's go one at a time here, guys. It's a little cross-talk there. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I would say the Constitution is very clear on this. It talks about who has the right to maintain the militia, and the National Guard has been codified in U.S. law that the National Guard is the militia of the state. But there is not even a call in the Constitution for a standing army. And so anybody that's a true constitutionalist would understand that the role of the National Guard is and should be to be a reserve or a offensive military component for the active duty military if Congress follows the Constitution properly. But we're never going to get rid of a standing army. We recognize that. But all we're asking then is that if you want to use our National Guard, our tradesmen, our teachers, our mechanics, our home builders, our fathers, our mothers, and you want to take them from their full civilian life and put them actively in harm's way into combat zones, then please just do your job first and declare war, because that changes everything. That declaration of war now becomes the rule, the law of the land, and the use of the National Guard as an offensive or defensive force is now authorized, proper, and should be done.
Anthony Sabatini, do you think that we're going to have more Republican interest in this in the legislature because of Biden being in the White House?
You know, that's a really interesting consideration. I think that could obviously be a contributing factor. I think the first thing that Republicans were coming into the legislature, and of course in Florida, thankfully we have term limits, so we're always bringing in new minds, open minds, people who are open to new ideas. And a lot of the Republicans that are coming into power these days, new voices being elected, are of I would consider the more America First Trump foreign policy. Those the non-interventionist, anti-endless war policy viewpoint, which is one I ascribe to. And so this is a bill that anyone who ascribes to that philosophy, which is I think a majority of the new Republicans being elected, hopefully, are going to find it very appetizing. But you bring up an interesting point with Biden being, I think, a pretty clear proponent of the failed historic foreign policy that's got us into so many messes and has caused so many human tragedies, especially in the last 20 years, him coming into power is going to highlight and force members to take, a smarter, wiser approach on this and get behind this bill.
And at the same time, what about the Democrat side? Have you had any conversations with Democrats in the Florida legislature? Is there some interest there to do something with this bill? Is it too early for that conversation yet? I mean, where do we stand with that side of the aisle for this issue? That could work the opposite way for them. If Biden signals that he wants to expand efforts in these wars abroad, they might get the cue to start talking like Dick Cheney on the Democratic side over in the state legislature. So what's the sound like over there?
Well, that's an interesting consideration. I haven't started those preliminary conversations yet, and as one would expect in the state legislature, there's only kind of rare occurrences when foreign policy becomes a major topic. And I think in this case, it deserves to be a major topic for the state legislature to approach and make a decision on. So I'm looking forward to those conversations. I do know that, unfortunately, one of the one of the sort of new perspectives of the Democrat Party is sort of defending the interventionism. We saw that with a lot of the presidential candidates. I'm hoping that the down-ballot candidates for Democrats here in the Florida legislature don't ascribe to the dated and destructive worldview of the Democrats on the national stage. I think a lot of them have open minds. Once again, term limits, a lot of new people coming in with open minds on the issue, and I'm almost certain we're going to bring in a lot of co-sponsors from the Democrat side.
Well, that's great to hear. I hope that happens. And when will this bill be most likely introduced? And, what can people do to signal their support or to defend the Guard Act?
Well, so the legislative session in Florida starts the first week of March. Committee weeks, which is when a lot of this substantive work on bills that are emerging and passing through committees before they go to the floor of the House of Representatives begins in just shy of a month, about mid-January or so. So hopefully, if legislative elected leadership of the Florida House gets behind this bill, we could see this thing getting heard and getting hearings on it as early as late January, early February.
Well, that would be great news to hear. Let's start the new year off right. I like this idea, and I appreciate you getting behind this, Anthony Sabatini, as a representative here in Florida. And I thank you for coming on the program. And I also want to give a shout out again to Sergeant Dan McKnight of BringOurTroopsHome.us. I know that you've been working tirelessly to push this and coordinate this effort to have Defend the Guard acts passed across this country in various state legislatures. It's a much needed thing as we start to push back against forever wars and lawlessness in federal DC. So thanks again for both of you joining me today on A Neighbor's Choice.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
The same to you. We'll be back with more live on A Neighbor's Choice in just a moment. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's OakleyTransport.com. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less delivered to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Our Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host here. We just heard from State Representative Anthony Sabatini, who's a member of the National Guard and a member of the state legislature, as well as Sergeant Dan McKnight, who's a veteran from the overseas conflict and founder of BringOurTroopsHome.us, a veterans group, about the Defend the Guard Act and how important it is for this to be a moment of leadership for those in the state legislature of Florida, a bipartisan no-brainer, because that's what the Constitution says, as that Congress shall declare war. If you don't declare war, if you have an authorization of the use of force, that's not a declaration of war. That's a passing the buck off to the executive branch to engage troops or not engage troops around different countries, here and there, everywhere. There's no end, there's no formal state of war. And it is something that has led to a calamitous situation in which the same authorization of the use of force that was supposed to go after al-Qaeda ends up allowing us to fight on their behalf or on their side in Syria and Libya. Horrible. And it's disgusting that this is something that has persisted so long, and that the media has been able to cover for these people all the way through, such that, you know, half the country who calls themselves socially just and put on signs, love trumps hate and all this stuff, there shall be no home, their hate has no home here, those little signs you see, and yet they hatefully want to continue to arm al-Qaeda and these horrible people. Most of them don't really know what they're doing, right? They don't know. But you have to be kind of amazing to has to be pretty amazing to imagine that you don't know, given all the information that's available to the public today. Of course, you're not going to hear that on the pro-war bigoted outlets like MSNBC and CNN and Fox News and so forth. But here's a story that I think kind of highlights another factor about this war, which is how these things become useful tools to creating surveillance, mass surveillance, illegal surveillance. And it's a story that I saw on Revolver.news. It says Julian Assange's fiancée sits down with Revolver to reveal deep state's plot to erase our First Amendment. And a quote from it is that Julian, it says, this is from his fiancée. She says, Julian will not face a fair trial, not only because the Espionage Act does not permit a public interest defense, which is an obvious abuse for a publisher, but also because Alexandria, Virginia, has deliberately been chosen as the venue for his trial in order to rig the outcome. No national security defendant has ever won a case there. The Alexandria court complex is 15 miles from CIA headquarters. It has a special rule. Jury members cannot be excluded on the basis that they work for the government. It is horrendous. I mean, you got to think about that. That's awful. I didn't know that Alexandria court had a special rule that jury members cannot be excluded on the basis that they work for the government, because everybody in that area works for the government or has a friend or family member that works for the government. So they don't have a neutral observation about the facts. They're committed to the perpetuation of the bureaucracy or whatever it is that their friends are connected to, or their family is connected to, or they're connected to. I just think that's completely ridiculous. It's such a farce. And where's the progressive left on defending Julian Assange? You hear such few voices on that side. They're supposed to be the number one champions of this stuff, and they've dropped the ball completely. She goes on to say in this Revolver.news interview, Julian Assange's fiance says, it is clear from Julian's tweets that he considers Michael Flynn's prosecution to have been political from the start. The interest in prosecuting Flynn was because of his political position. Roger Stone's prosecution was also clearly politically motivated. Contrast these with James Clapper, who lied multiple times to Congress. Lying to Congress about illegal spying on the entire U.S. population is surely one of the gravest lies ever told to Congress. Clapper escaped prosecution. Stone and Flynn have not. The case against Julian is political and should never have been pursued. It's extremely controversial, even within the DOJ. The Washington Post reported that 2 prosecutors working on the case resigned over Julian's indictment under the Espionage Act because they understood that it is a violation of the Constitution to apply it to a publisher. And the result is that it will destroy the First Amendment. In sworn testimony, U.S. prosecutors conceded that there is no evidence that a single person has come to physical harm as a result of WikiLeaks publications. The computer charge is also political. It doesn't even allege that Julian hacked anything, and it was destroyed in court by the U.S. Army's former chief forensic investigator, who was a defense expert witness. DOJ prosecutors keep on moving the goalposts, so in the latest version of the indictment, incredible as it sounds, they've recruited a convicted pedophile and diagnosed psychopath who Julian put behind bars as their new witness. I mean, it's not surprising. That's the kind of folks that they tend to, find the best use for, unfortunately. And that's what we continue to see all across this story. So it's important that President Trump gives a pardon to Julian Assange. It's important. This could be a huge legacy moment that's almost bigger than anything else for what he could do for this country. Is to send a message that you cannot put people in prison for publishing information, that you cannot just run totally over the rights like the First Amendment, which is unique and absolute because it says that Congress has no ability, the federal government has no ability to abridge the right to publish, the right to oppress, the right to speech. It has no place for it's not see, most people think because they worship the state so much, they think that somehow that's a power that government has granted us permission to speak. We're free to speak because they allow us to. No, that document says they are prohibited from having anything to do with our right to publish and speak freely, because those rights are inherent to our humanity. They're given to us by our image in the image of God that we have. They're not to be abridged by some puny, pathetic little government that comes and goes in the stage of history. But that's what we have to deal with. People who worship the state so much that they will throw away their own freedom if it means going after someone the television tells them that they're supposed to hate. So let's hope that Donald Trump makes a heroic move here and gives a full pardon to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and all the other folks like Ross Ulbricht and others, many thousands and thousands that need to come home. So we'll be back with more with Jeff Deist after this short break.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. Madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason and sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
President-elect Biden acknowledging this holiday season is going to be different for many Americans than usual.
For the Bidens, we usually have 20 to 25 family members over for Christmas dinner, and then the immediate family, 14 of our kids and grandkids and their spouses for coming down the stairs on Christmas morning, but not this year.
Mr. Biden urging Americans to remain vigilant, to wear masks, stay socially distant, and avoid large gatherings. The president-elect also calling on the Trump administration to officially attribute the SolarWinds cyber attack, which crippled several government agencies and U.S. companies, to Russia. Governor Gavin Newsom selecting California Secretary of State Alex Padilla to fill the remainder of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's Senate term. The COVID tracking project says December is on track to become the deadliest month of the pandemic, with more than 51,000 coronavirus-related deaths in the last 3 weeks alone. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here, your host, and we're soaring high across the Sunshine State on FM and AM. Perhaps you're listening on WFLA Orlando, 93.1 FM, 540 AM, or perhaps WHBO Tampa Bay, our flagship stations here in Florida. We welcome you all. And we're joined now by a friend of the program and someone who provides commentary outside of the left versus right binary frame. We have the president of the Mises Institute, Jeff Deist, with us. How you doing, Jeff?
David, I am doing fantastic. Very, very, very Merry Christmas to you.
Yes, and same to you. And didn't Christmas come early this year because we're getting a little handout from government? Aren't you excited?
Well, it struck me when I saw that. I wonder how many handguns will magically be repriced right at $600. Some of those guns that are $400 and $500 now, and if enough people go into the local gun shop or pawn shop, that they can sell them for more. I just wonder if that might just settle in. And I say that in jest somewhat, but the bigger picture is that, you know, if government gave everybody money all the time, let's say it gave the poorest people in society only $2,000 every month in universal basic income. Well, I guess I shouldn't say universal, but in basic income for the poorest people who can somehow demonstrate that they make less than $20,000. What you would quickly find is that in towns across America, the very lowest level of rental housing, whether that was trailers or the more dilapidated apartment buildings, would just very quickly adjust the price. Because a lot of people who are either currently homeless or are, you know, flopping on some friends' couches or living out of a vehicle or whatever would all of a sudden have this new $2,000 a month to go purchase or to rent an apartment. But that $2,000 wouldn't magically bring a bunch of new rental stock online. It would simply create a bunch of new dollars. So so I jest about the $600 handgun, but you might see a bunch of Christmas gifts all of a sudden priced right on $600 because people think they're getting it.
Right. It's interesting that, you know, they continue to say, hey, we did as much as we could. We got you $600 of scraps. But you look at that bill, it's $1 trillion. And so that seems to be the smallest piece of the whole puzzle. What's the rest of that money going to, Jeff? Have you done your accounting of that bill?
Well, yeah, I mean, what you have to understand is that this bill, which was presented late night in the Senate and then overnight to the U.S. House, which is the people you and your listeners vote for every 2 years, this bill has been written over a period of many, many months. So we need to get over this idea that they got together and huddled with some sort of overnight COVID relief bill. That's not how this happens. Lobbyists for various industries always are crafting together what they call omnibus bills, which are just broad spending bills that don't just stick to any one category. Normally, the spending bills in Congress are divvied up amongst, like, the Labor Department and the Department of Health and Human Services is one, and there's a DOD, a defense bill, and so they're siloed into separate bills. But whenever you see what's called an omnibus or a minibus bill, what that means is all the different kinds of spending bills, also known as appropriations bills, are being glommed together under one giant bill. And that's always bad, because that means the ability of any one legislator or even his or her staff to know everything that's in the bill becomes well nigh impossible. So a lot of unholy stuff gets stuck into these minibus and omnibus bills. And we're seeing today all kinds of crazy foreign aid. I mean, millions and millions of dollars to all kinds of countries, including something that was like to help feminist causes in Pakistan. And, of course, there's a bunch of money for Israel, which I suspect will be used for more militarization there. So money for Saudi Arabia, you name it. So this is par for the course. Look, it's tired, it's played, it's cliched to say, oh my gosh, Americans are getting $600, but all these foreign governments are getting millions and millions. But that's just the reality. I mean, the reason they do this stuff time and time and time again, oftentimes late at night or whatever, is because they can. And as long as they can, they're going to continue to do it. We don't have the money. It's not helping anybody here. $600 is not going to pay anyone's back rent or back mortgage. It's not going to make up for anyone's lost job at a restaurant or whatever. But this is symbolism, and it's as far as symbolic help goes, it's pretty scant.
Now the thing is, though, with this direct payment thing, we had Ryan McMakin with Mises.org on last week. On the program, and he was talking about, I think he called it the Catalan effect. Is that what it's called? It's about this. Is that the right name?
Yes, it is called the Catalan effect. It's named after a famous French economist of a few hundred years back named Catalan, and he figured out that money is never neutral, whether the king is creating it or whether the government is creating it, or whether a central bank is creating it. There's always somebody who stands earlier in the line to get that new money sooner. And so that person or interest or industry or company, gets that money before prices have risen generally throughout the economy. So they're the early recipient and therefore the beneficiary of that newly created money. And we've seen with a lot of the Federal Reserve's expansionary monetary policy over the years since the crash of 07-08 that a lot of that money's gone into the stock market. A lot of it's gone into rising stock prices and rising real estate prices, which really benefit only the specific holders of those assets. So the Cantillon effect just basically says that the little guy, the person who maybe does make $20,000 a year and lives in a trailer, is going to, get the money last in most cases as a political reality, and hence it's not only is it $600, but it's a rapidly depreciating $600.
Right. That's what I kind of want to get at is, with all these direct payments now, are we going to start seeing inflation faster than normal? Because most of the time it gets stored up in these. When they create all this money, it goes to these special corporations and banks, and they just kind of keep all this cash on in their little reserves. And so therefore there's been kind of a lag in the effects of rising prices. But with all these direct payments from the first COVID bucks and now the second wave, are we going to start to see inflation tick upwards, or will it not work like that?
Well, the only answer to that question is, are we going to see price inflation, is I don't know. And the reason that answer is correct is because, yes, everything the federal government is doing, everything the central bank is doing is inflationary. It's inflationary by design. They'll tell you this openly. That's the policy. Right. They're not hiding this. This isn't a subterfuge. But everything happening in the broader economy is that people are scared, people are skittish, people are shedding debt. They're going out less, they're traveling less, they're dining less, they're buying less gasoline, they're hiring less. So all of these forces across the global economy are hugely deflationary. So you've got two forces at work here. So I can't say, and if I knew, I would be out there with, acting on that knowledge of my personal finances. But so beware of someone who tells you definitively. But yes, if I had to bet, my strong feeling is that we're going to see a lot greater price inflation, consumer price inflation, basic stuff in the 2020s than we did the 2010s. That's my opinion. But more importantly, these guys are full of it when it comes to everybody knows that food's gotten more expensive. Everybody knows that college tuition and private schools have gotten more expensive. Everybody knows that the doctors' copays and the prescriptions have gotten more expensive. So there's all kinds of things in the economy that have gone up. Now, that doesn't mean that a pair of Levi's has gone up in the same way. That doesn't mean that the cost of a DVD player has gone up, because demand for DVD players has fallen dramatically because of streaming. So, of course, there's always broader factors in the economy with just simple supply and demand. Nobody wants DVD players anymore. So no matter what the Fed does, those things are going to be $40 at Walmart. They used to be $400 in 1990 or whatever. Okay? But all things being equal, we have to know that expansionary monetary policy, expansionary fiscal policy is just putting more money and credit and potential credit into the system without bringing any new goods or services into existence. Yes, that is inflationary. So, and look, you can be wrong. We can all be wrong about whether inflation is coming, but if it does come, it's so bad, it's so harmful that there's nothing wrong with trying to protect yourself and anticipate it. Because if you're wrong, maybe you've missed out on some paper stock market gains, but if you're right, you've done you and your family a service.
And that's what I think a lot of people are really concerned about is Washington's never going to stop doing what it's doing. So people don't know what to do. They feel like they're along for a hostage ride, like there's no way they're just kind of being dragged along. And what are they supposed to do? They're in a situation where they just, they don't, they feel kind of helpless and confused, and they're trying to defend themselves with voting and so forth, but that's not working out. So what do you say to folks who are in that feeling right now, and they don't understand economics that deeply, but they're hearing your perspective and they're saying, my goodness, I don't know what to even do to prepare for what they're doing.
Well, let me just suggest one small thing before Christmas to scratch that itch a little bit. If you go to www.house.gov, you can look up by zip code and even +4 zip code who is your member of Congress. Your member of Congress will have a homepage, and that homepage has a number for their D.C. office. Ignore that. Look a little deeper on their homepage and find out the district offices. Every member of Congress has at least one district office, generally in the biggest city. And every senator has several offices scattered throughout the state. So you can do this for your senator, too. So that's senate.gov and house.gov. Okay, find out where their district offices are. Then just go dig up in the roll call votes. You can Google U.S. House roll call votes to find out how they voted on this turkey of a stimulus bill. Call them up and call their district office. Call them tomorrow and just say, I don't appreciate you voting for this stimulus. $600 is a joke with all this other money, and I'm going to vote against you just because this particular bill is so egregious. Then get 50 of your friends on social media in your town to do it as well. Call their district office, not their DC, because in DC the switchboard, 50 calls doesn't matter much, but in a district office, 50 calls will make their staffer freak out, And, even though there's 700,000 people in a typical congressional district, 740,000, it'll make them freak out, and they will tell their boss. But you got to follow through. You got to get 50 of your friends to call. And if you say you're going to vote against them in the next election, and that could be a primary, too, if you happen to like the party that your representative represents, but you got to follow through. And you got to say, you know what? With everything going on with COVID, with our economy, with everything going on in this country right here, right now, if you were willing to vote for this piece of you-know-what that gives me $600 but gives hundreds of millions of dollars to foreign countries, I'm voting against you just on that bill and just on the general principle that you could be that blind and tone deaf. And a few of you, not many of you, unfortunately, a few of you are going to have a pleasant surprise and find out that your representative voted no if you do a little bit of digging. I promise you it won't be hard, but if you call their district office, you would be surprised how effective that can be.
And because you worked in Congress, did you, right?
I did, and there were bills, all kinds of bills, where certain interest groups got together and mounted a campaign, and they told everyone, call the main switchboard in D.C. Well, all that is a bunch of algorithms routing calls to, a relatively large D.C. office. But the district offices are much smaller, and they answer the phones personally, so I really recommend that.
That's very helpful. It reminds me of what Jesse Kelly on Twitter said. He says, Congress is garbage. I hate these people, says Americans who have the power to send 435 of them home every 2 years and instead reelect them 90% of the time. And that kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like the Soviet Politburo. I mean, these people just get in for a long, long time. And we really need to be figuring out how to get rid of some of them. And because of gerrymandering, in a lot of instances, that means a primary, not a general election. So, primaries will probably be decisive in 2 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to see if people will have a Tea Party type return where they want to start actually caring about deficits now that a Republican is not in the White House or the House. They always turn into big liberty advocates and start bringing out their Bastiat quotes. And hey, better late than never. We'll take them when we can. But we've got to get serious about this situation here and stop playing games, because it's going to really mess up the whole economy for everybody. I think everybody just says, yeah, I'm against deficit spending and all this stuff, but I'll take my little handout for my industry because everybody else is getting it. It's like a bank robbery, and everybody's just grabbing their hand in the cash and running, and it's just terrible. But we're going to try to sort it out, and we're going to try to look for some positives. I'm going to ask our guest with us, Jeff Deist of Mises.org, when we return, some things to be thankful about in the Christmas season as we think about the liberties we still enjoy and the prosperity we have. We'll be back in just a moment.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
Hi, this is Gary from Good Faith Home Buyers, and I buy houses cash. If you own your house and want to sell it fast, call me at 727-330-6224. That's 727-330-6224. I can pay cash and close fast. I buy houses in any condition, any price range, and any location. I'm not a realtor or associated with any realty company. I'm a private real estate investor who buys several houses.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America. to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Attention middle school and high school football kickers. The Super Bowl in Tampa is right around the corner. This year, we're giving aspiring young kickers the chance to show off their abilities and win 4 tickets to the FSU Notre Dame game in Tallahassee next season with $250 cash. Visit protogroup.com/Super Bowl to register and find details on how to enter. Parents and legal guardians encouraged to register under 18-year-olds. Winning videos will be streamed on the social media platform TSU, pronounced Sue, and the overall winner will be announced live by a celebrity guest during a special Super Bowl halftime video and radio broadcast on the Riverwalk in Tampa. The winner will be chosen on style points, distance, and unique qualities. Runners-up will receive merchandise from the Hall of Fame, and the most liked entry will receive an extra bonus prize. Register now at protogroup.com/Super Bowl. That's Protogroup, PRODO Group.com/Super Bowl. Be a winner at protogroup.com/Super Bowl in association with Sue, social that pays.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Auto Glass America now and fix that pane in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
Hello, David Gronowski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm here with our guest, Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute. Their website is mises.org. You can also follow Jeff on Twitter, at Jeff Deist on Twitter, where you can see his comments on the economy and politics and our need to get away from politics. So I thought in this time of Christmas, Jeff, that you and I could have a little positive segment. You know, there's so much negativity in the news, and I always challenge people who want to sow negativity. And it's hard to find an ability to report on the news without dwelling on the negative, because it's just everybody's doing everything wrong. But perhaps, Jeff, we can try to find some positive things. What are some positive things that you're looking forward to or thinking about in gratitude during this Christmas season as we head into the new year?
Well, there are lots of things to be positive. I think first and foremost is just the remarkable resiliency of the American economy in the sense of its ability to continue to produce energy and groceries and gasoline, and ATM machines are full. In other words, even with these COVID lockdowns and even with all this disruptions in employment we've seen around the country, we've been pretty secure from disruptions in food, hot and cold running water, gas at the gas station. I mean, there were some silly things earlier in the year, toilet paper and that sort of thing. There was a little bit of meat rationing at certain groceries for a period. I haven't seen or read much about that of late, and we don't want that back, that's for sure. So that's pretty remarkable. It just shows you that we're such an advanced economy. Now, unfortunately, we're eating a lot of our capital. We're eating a lot of our seed corn with all of these ridiculous lockdowns. But nonetheless, it's, I think, comforting, and we ought to recognize that the economy has continued to bring all these things to our house. We're very, very fortunate for that. I think we're also fortunate in that the rest of the world, certainly in many places in Europe, has been locked down worse and for far longer. A lot of country, Australia, certain regions of Australia have been really thoroughly locked down. London right now is experiencing a really insane lockdown where the police are even looking at people trying to escape on trains. I mean, David, people are trying to get on the train just out to Leeds or someplace just to be out of London, where these so-called Tier 4 bans are in effect, just that they can have Christmas somewhere. So we're fortunate compared to them, and in the United States, at least for the moment, we maintain a high degree of mobility. A lot of people are leaving. I just read some stats today about the number of people leaving San Francisco. We all know what's happened in New York and New Jersey. We all know about the growth in Florida. I'm sure you're feeling it in Orlando and Tampa. We still have that relative degree of freedom to vote to an extent with our feet, at least within the United States itself. So despite all the rhetoric, it's nice to see that some people are simply doing what they think is best for themselves and their families, and in effect casting a vote against what I would consider crazy lockdown policies and in favor of relative freedom, like you have with Governor DeSantis in Florida.
Yeah, I heard a news break where ABC was saying, yeah, one lady's going to fly to see her family. And then the news reporter said, the authorities say you are not supposed to do that. Please don't do that. Oh, my. It's like these guys, I call them low rent Pravda, Jeff, because I don't think they take a direct check from the government, but they do the best PR work for the state and its bureaucracies I've ever seen any media complex do. It's pretty cheap how much it takes to get them to be sycophants for whatever the state wants. It's amazing.
Yeah, they do it free. It is amazing, and it's just so ingrained in them to be court stenographers for government. Government says something, and they just sort of dutifully jot it down and report it. People should have been questioning Fauci and the CDC and the WHO and the mask requirements and the hydroxychloroquine and all of these stories much, much deeper from the get-go. We should have had a media that actually served our interests with some skepticism. But there's always skepticism towards markets and, private solutions, but there's never skepticism towards government. And the media is a big part of the reason for the pickle we're in, because they helped create this perception that COVID was this exceedingly dangerous, exceedingly virulent, exceedingly transmissible virus. And so much of what we were told just wasn't true. And here we are about 9 months later.
Right. I remember in 2008, I think it was, I remember reading an FDA press release. And then I saw that night, Katie Couric of CBS, the news anchor at the time, basically doing a report. And she was not telling people that she was reading the press release, but she was saying the news report as if it was an objective news report when it was actually quoting the FDA press release and not letting people know it was the same thing. That was an eye-opening moment for me, Jeff, because I realized, my goodness, these guys so sloppy. They don't even, hardly anybody was reading that press release. I happened to have read it from the FDA and then heard it regurgitated as an objective news report from Katie Couric of CBS News.
Yeah, it is remarkable.
Yeah, that's what we have to deal with, Jeff, in the future is information, being able to cultivate a culture where we can have diversity of thought, respect people's differences for medicine, for travel, for work, and not demonize people. We've got to have that if we want to continue as a society. So that's what Merry Christmas represents to me. It represents the idea that we don't have to rely on kings and queens to tell us what to do and what to eat. We have our freedom and we shouldn't let it go. Jeff, I appreciate you coming on the program.
Well, thanks very much, David. It's great to talk with you.
Very good, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. And remember, folks, you can visit Jeff at Mises.org or at Jeff Deist on Twitter. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.